The dawn over the royal courtyard arrived like a soft velvet ribbon, the sky brushed in pink and gold. Cinderella stood at the window of her chamber, teacup warming her hands, watching doves bob along the balustrade. She'd been up early, polishing a pair of glass slippers that somehow still felt new, no matter how many times they caught the light and fractured it into lilac and blue. Since the great ball and her marriage to the kind prince, life had become a gentle hum, duties, laughter, and an abiding gratitude that made everything seem a little brighter. A knock like a bell, 3 quick taps, brought her to the door. A palace footman bowed and extended a silver tray. On it lay an envelope edged in pale ice blue, sealed with a snowflake stamped in wax. A courier bird delivered this from the north. "Your Grace," the footman said, a note of awe in his voice. "From Queen Elsa of Arundel." Cinderella's brow lifted. Stories of Elsa's winter magic had reached every hearth and hall. Carefully, she broke the seal. As she unfolded the letter, a faint breath of cool air slipped from the paper like a whisper. The words seemed frosted into existence. "Dear Cinderella, Arundel is hosting the Snowlight Festival, where the northern lights sing across the sky. I've admired your grace and kindness from afar. Would you honor me with your presence as a friend? I would love to share a day of winter magic with you, skating beneath the stars, cocoa by the hearth, and a surprise I think only you will understand. If you would come, pin this snowflake at your window by nightfall. My magic will find you. Warmly and coolly. Elsa." Cinderella touched the small paper snowflake enclosed, its edges faintly cold yet feather-soft. She smiled, that private smile she wore whenever the world offered her something unexpectedly gentle. She pinned the snowflake to her window latch. "I've always wanted to see the northern lights," as she murmured. "And it seems the lights want to see me, too." Night fell, and the palace gardens hushed to a silver stillness. When the clock chimed 9, the air in Cinderella's chamber stirred, first like a sigh, then like a kiss of winter. Threads of light slipped through the window, unfurling into a path of sparkling frost that arched into the sky. Cinderella donned a travelling cloak the colour of storm-soft sea and carried her glass slippers in a small velvet bag. She stepped onto the frost path, cool, but not cold, and it held her, firm as a bridge and soft as silk. The world below blurred into shades of midnight blueberry and cream. Stars winked like mischievous sprites. The moon, round and benevolent, watched over her. Far ahead, the path led toward a horizon painted with dancing greens and violets, the aurora rippling like a banner. As she travelled, the frost sang, no words, just a music of chimes and snowbell tones, promising welcome. By the time the path dipped toward a fjord framed by mountains, Cinderella could see a castle glowing from within, crystalline and pale as dawn. It rose like a waterfall frozen mid-cascade, turrets aspiring to touch the aurora. She caught her breath. How beautiful, as she whispered, understanding suddenly how magic could be not only powerful, but gentle. At the foot of the gleaming stair of ice, a figure waited, cloaked in the same blues and whites that cloaked the sky. Elsa! Light seemed to lean toward her, as if glad to be near. Welcome, Cinderella, Elsa said, her smile as warm as her breath, which clouded gently in the night air. I'm so happy you came. They curtsied, softly, almost conspiratorially, and then Cinderella laughed. May we skip the formalities, Your Majesty? I feel I'm visiting a friend. Then it's Elsa, the Queen replied, her eyes bright. And it's Cinderella only if you promise to let me call you Ella after Coco. Deal, as Cinderella said. They ascended the stairs together, the ice singing underfoot but not slipping. Inside, the castle glittered with soft lantern blues and hearth gold. Though it was made of ice, it did not feel cold. It felt alive, like a winter forest where every pine needle held a secret. The walls hummed faintly, as if keeping time with their footsteps. "I've heard stories about your kindness," Elsa said as they walked. "How you befriended mice, how you forgave those who never forgave themselves. That kind of magic doesn't leave a trail of frost, but I think it changes the world more." "That's funny," a Cinderella said, smiling. "I was thinking how easily your magic took my fear away the moment I saw your castle." They entered a hall where an ice chandelier hung like an upside-down winter garden, tinkling blossoms of crystal, delicate vines, droplets suspended mid-fall. A hearth flickered at one end, firelight turning the ice a dozen sunset colors. A table waited with steaming mugs and a mountain of marshmallows. "Cocoa first," Elsa declared. "Then the real adventure." Their skates, gifted by Elsa, fit perfectly, silver blades catching and scattering star scraps of light. A lake lay just beyond the castle, ringed by snow-laden firs. Elsa brushed a hand across its surface, smoothing it to a mirror that reflected the northern lights. They pushed off. Cinderella wobbled, windmilling, laughing at herself. "It's been a very long time since I did this," as she confessed. "Then we'll relearn together," Elsa said, and promptly pretended to forget how to skate, stepping with exaggerated caution. Cinderella giggled. A trio of snowmen on the bank, maybe acquaintances of a certain famous snowman, waved stick arms in encouragement. Soon they were gliding. Their breath made twin ribbons in the air. Elsa twirled, trailing a lace of frost behind her. Cinderella followed, hands outstretched, trusting the ice. She fell once, then twice, then not at all, each time she laughed before her body even hit the snow, and Elsa's laughter chimed with hers. In a quiet lull, the sky seemed to lean closer. The aurora unfurled as though it heard their delight and wanted to be part of it. "Look," Elsa whispered, slowing. "The lights are singing." Cinderella listened. Beneath the breeze, beneath the tiny cracks and clicks of settling ice, there was a sound like a choir of crystal bells, distant and near at once. "Do they sing for everyone?" "I think they sing when they're heard," Elsa said. "And we're listening." After skating, they walked along a path where snowflowers, tiny blossoms Elsa coaxed from the ice, glowed underfoot. They talked as friends talk when the world makes room for it. Cinderella spoke of her stepfamily, how anger had pinched their lives small and how forgiveness felt like opening a window in a stuffy room. "I thought kindness meant letting people use you up," as she said. "But really, it's the opposite. It makes you whole, and then you have something to share." Elsa nodded. "I thought love was dangerous," as she answered honestly. "But love was the thing that steadied my hands. Anna showed me that. The people of Arendelle, too. Magic asks for belonging as much as it asks for power." They reached a small pavilion of ice shaped like a seashell. Inside, a harp made from icicles waited. Elsa plucked a string, notes floated like perfume. Cinderella tried, and the icicles answered with a bright ripple. Together they made a simple melody, one that sounded like the hush of snow on the eaves and the soft thump of friends sitting side by side. "You know," Elsa said, "I think the world has tongues we forget we can speak. Music, light, kindness. Maybe that's why the aurora sings. And why glass slippers ring when you tap them just right," as Cinderella teased. She took the velvet bag from her cloak and lifted one slipper. It caught the aurora and threw it back in a kaleidoscope burst. "I brought them to show you." Elsa's eyes widened. "They're beautiful. May I?" She reached out, and when she touched the slipper, frost scrolled along its arch, dissolving just as quickly, a hello, not a claim. That evening, Elsa led Cinderella to a long table set in the grand hall, where platters steamed and spiced scents rose like homing birds. Arundel cooks had created a winter feast, roasted root vegetables glazed until they gleamed, flaky pies perfumed with herbs, cloud-soft rolls, and a pudding that trembled like a snowdrift in a breeze. Beside each place setting sat a little glass bell jar, each holding something curious: a frost feather, a pine cone no bigger than a thumbnail, a forget-me-not preserved in ice. "These are the small wonders," Elsa said. "I like to collect them on days that feel like quiet gifts. Today feels like that." They tasted everything, comparing favorites, laughing at how many marshmallows Cinderella could fit in her cocoa before it rebelled. Elsa showed her how to crack the sugar crust on a custard with the back of a spoon. Cinderella taught Elsa a palace game where you predict the future from how your tea swirls, a game with no rules, which made it the most fun. Between courses, they opened the glass jars and made wishes. Cinderella held the frost feather on her palm, feeling its impossible weightlessness. "I wish that the girls who work in the sculleries, the ones who dream in soap bubbles and broom bristle, know that their dreams are not foolish," as she said. Elsa cradled the tiny pine cone. "I wish the children who feel too much, too loud or too bright or too cold, find friends who stand close enough to warm them." They did not tell each other the third wishes, because some wishes are secret by necessity, and the Aurora heard them anyway. "Come," Elsa said after the last spoon had scraped the last saucer. "There's a room I've been saving for you." They passed through a corridor of ice that held within it a run of river water, suspended as though time itself had paused to look at them. The corridor opened into a circular hall whose dome was as transparent as a soap bubble. Elsa lifted her hands. Frost curved, flowered, and softened. The walls bloomed with scenes in ice, faint as breath on glass and yet as detailed as miniature paintings. Cinderella stepped closer. In one panel, she saw a kitchen hearth, her own figure kneeling to tend the fire, while mice arranged crumbs into a smile nearby. In another, a pumpkin carriage rolled under a pearl moon. She pressed her fingers to her lips. "Elsa, how did you?" "Memories answer when I call gently," Elsa said. "I asked the world what comfort looked like for you. It gave me this." Cinderella turned, tears brightening without falling. "Then I have something for you, too." She held the glass slipper against a patch of clear wall. Elsa understood. She touched the ice, and a scene grew like frost lace. Two little girls in a castle attic, one with white blonde braids, giggling as snowflakes she had conjured melted on her sister's nose. Elsa's breath wavered. "Anna," she whispered. They stood together, surrounded by the rooms of their own lives. The images didn't feel heavy. They felt like lanterns lit along a dark path, saying, "You've been walking a long time, and you are not alone." The hour thinned to midnight. The aurora intensified until the air seemed softly alive, each breath a cool petal. Elsa led Cinderella to a balcony that faced north. "I told you I had a surprise," as she said, a playful spark in her voice. She opened her palm. Snowflakes rose from it like fireflies in reverse, small stars drifting upward. They wove themselves in midair into a coronet, ice interlaced with tiny bells of frost. "For you," Elsa said gently. "Not a crown to rule by, but a crown to remember by. It will keep whenever you choose kindness over pride, and it will shine brightest when you forgive someone very hard to forgive." Cinderella's throat tightened. She had crowns aplenty in the palace, but none like this, none that asked for who she wanted to be, instead of what she must be. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "But perhaps I can try to give something that remembers with you." She fitted one glass slipper back onto her foot, then held out its twin to the night. The slipper chimed, a sound like a promise. Light threaded into it from the aurora until it glowed pale blue. From within, a warm flame bloomed and settled, a winter candle that did not burn or melt, but listened. Cinderella offered it to Elsa. "Keep it where you keep your quiet," she said. "Let it glow when you are most yourself." Elsa accepted the gift with a look that said no thanks were necessary. And still they thanked each other, with a hug, careful but unafraid, a meeting of warmth and cool that felt exactly right. Before the night fades, Elsa said, "I want to show you one last thing." She summoned a wide circle of ice in the meadow beyond the castle, banked by snow lanterns. Music drifted from nowhere and everywhere, strings and winds and the delicate chime of icicles. The snowflowers around the circle opened, each petal catching aurora light as if cupped hands had become blossoms. Elsa extended her hand. Cinderella took it. They began to waltz. They moved as if the world had been waiting for this dance, two women who had carried different burdens and found, astonishingly, that their burdens talked to each other. Elsa guided with a steadiness born from storms mastered and storms befriended. Cinderella answered with a trust born from years of believing that gentleness could be fierce when needed. Their footsteps drew a pattern on the ice that brightened as they traced it. Spirals, loops, a lark's wing turn, a heartbeat's pulse. The pattern lifted, becoming a lace of frost that drifted upward and, to their shared amazement, shaped itself into a great snowbird. It hovered, beat its shining wings, and burst into a shower of silver sparks that settled on their hair and shoulders, like blessings. They didn't know who laughed first, only that both did, and that the laugh made the music swell. When the final note lingered, tangling with the last slow sweep of the aurora, they stood close, breathless and alight. "Friends," Elsa said, as if making a toast. "Friends," as Cinderella agreed, as if answering a vow. The night had softened toward morning. The frost path that had delivered Cinderella here unscrolled itself again, a ribbon lit from within. They stood at the foot of the crystal stairs, reluctant and not. Goodbyes are gentler when they know what they are, pauses, not endings. "I will write," Elsa said, taking Cinderella's hands in hers. "And next time, perhaps you'll host me. I have never danced with fireflies. They'll make you a crown of light if you hum a tune they like," as Cinderella said, with the lightness that comes when you've learned how to be heavy without breaking. "And our garden has evening roses that only open at twilight. I think your magic would like them." They embraced once more. When they parted, Elsa made a last, small gesture, a flurry of snowflakes that settled on Cinderella's cloak and stitched themselves into a pattern, a glass slipper and a snowflake side by side. Cinderella stepped onto the frost path. The castle, glowing behind Elsa, receded into the sky's tender ink. She watched the queen lift a hand in farewell until she was a bright figure the size of a star, then smaller, than a memory she could hold without closing her fist. The palace gardens were just tipping into dawn when Cinderella arrived home. Dew glittered on every leaf, somehow crisp with a touch of winter. The snowflake she'd pinned to the window had melted into a single drop that clung to the latch and would not fall. She placed the coronet on her vanity, where it reflected morning like a promise. The glass slipper with the winter candle went beside it, glowing as if remembering the music. Later, after breakfast laughter with the prince, after checking on the doves, after a small visit to the scullery where she left a little basket of honey pastries with no note, Cinderella returned to her room. She stood at the window. The world looked the same as it had yesterday and completely different. That is what true joy does. It refashions the ordinary until it can't help but glitter.